So if you want to leave your camera off, just kind of giving you a heads up that that's going to be going on. All right, anybody run into issues with that repo? I know sometimes install instructions, you got different versions of things. So want to make sure we're all good to go with that. As I said in the chat, there's also a code sandbox if you are not able to get this repo up and running. Okay. All right, so we're going to work through this, but what we're going to start with is the state hook. Okay, I'm going to go up to our vocabulary words, right? And this is going to be our first one here. Okay, we have this use state. This is a React hook, which enables us to add state to a functional component. All right, this is like that magic keyword that lets us use states where we couldn't before. Okay, all right, so that's going to be our first hook, is use state. All right, so what is going to happen is we're going to call this hook inside a functional component. It's going to add our local state to it. React is going to preserve the state between re-renders. It also returns a pair, okay? So honestly, this is doing the exact same thing as you're used to. It just looks a little bit different, okay? We're going to see the use state hook right here. That first line of our app, okay? So we can see that we have declared, we've got our name, we also have set name, and we've assigned it to use state of an empty string, okay? What do we think this is doing? Just right off the bat. Rana.
Is it initializing what we would want our name to start at the top of loading a page?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's setting that initial state, right? So we have declared that we're going to have a piece of state. We're deciding to call it name, okay? And then we're saying initially that state is going to be an empty string, right? Same thing as the stat state is assigned to name, right? So the second piece here is the thing that is probably the most different, right? We have something called set name. What do we think that this is going to offer us, Ethan?
So whereas before you would have to do set state, like now this is the specific function you use to set whatever the state is. So in this case, name.
Yeah, exactly. We'd have to kind of write it out like this dot state dot name and reassign it to whatever we want. So this is what is called a setter function. Okay, we got a setter function, and we're going to be able to use this in other places in our component to update state, change the value of name, right? So the naming conventions here, you can call this whatever you want, but I have always seen it start with the word set, okay? You have total freedom of this naming for both name and set name, but this is like what you should do, right? You should start with the word set and then have the name of your state, right? We're seeing it again below where we have a piece of state called age, and we're saying, all right, I'm going to create this setter function called set age, right? And be able to use that somewhere else, okay? All right, so same exact thing, just a different way to write it. And we're using that array destructuring syntax, which lets us kind of pick and choose what we want to name that, okay? All right, so I want to keep kind of looking through this component here, okay? Take your time. Anybody see anything else that looks a little bit different? Kayla.
There's no like a handle change method.
Yeah, we eliminated like a whole method. Amazing. Yes. What do you see, Hani?
There's also no render.
There's no render, exactly, because we are in a functional component, so we don't need it. Yeah, nice. Yeah, so we don't need a render function. We're only going to return because functions return. And we have eliminated our whole kind of, method we had for changing the value, right? We can do it all in here. We can call upon that setter function that's sort of built in. And yeah, it just looks a little bit cleaner, okay? All right, anything else? Any other differences we've noticed? Hani, was that from before? Okay, cool. Yeah, I think the only other difference is not having to write this.state.name, right? We can only just pass a name, does the same thing, right? So we're gonna kind of compare this side to side so you can get a better picture of how we're slimming down our code. But this is kind of how it's gonna look initially, right? Lots of similarities, but very different, just the syntax of how we are setting our state, okay? All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do some refactoring, okay? So we'll be doing this in breakout rooms. And we have a whole list of things for you to go through here. Again, I'm gonna try to set up the breakout rooms where you're gonna go into some random ones, but you'll have the option to leave as well if you wanna do this solo, okay? You'll be in the same breakout rooms throughout the lesson today, because there's gonna be a couple different parts on how we're doing this refactoring. So what you're gonna do is in that repo, you're gonna focus on this form components, okay, form.js, right? And when you open it up, excuse me, you will see that it is pretty much what you've done already with your idea boxes. This is our class-based component, okay? So you're gonna go through this and refactor it to turn it into a functional component, making use of the use state hook, okay? My advice when you're going through is comment things out, okay? Comment things out, comment out the constructor, kind of do one piece at a time, really read your error messages. I went through this yesterday, kind of forgot things. I was like looking at my error, fixing piece by piece until it was happy, okay? So make sure you can view all the error messages, you're commenting things out so you don't miss stuff as well, okay? So for this first round, only focus on the form component. We're gonna look at another one later on. Okay, so some things to be aware of, right? You're gonna wanna use that use state hook. You're going to refactor it, keep all the functionality the same, remove the constructor, replace with use states, okay? And there might be some refactoring to get all of the functionality continuing to work, okay? All right, any questions about this while I try to set up breakout rooms? I'll make them fairly small. We'll do like 3. Well, let's do 3 because in case people leave, we want to make sure that everybody's got enough people in the room to work with. All right. I think the way this is you should be able to move to the room. I don't know. I guess if it moves you to the room, just don't go to it. And then I'll move you into an individual room. This is always like way more complicated than it should be. Just fun. All right, we're gonna start with 15 minutes, may add some time. I'm definitely gonna be coming to all the rooms too, just to see how you're doing and answer any questions and have fun. All right, does anybody want to be moved to a solo room if it's not letting you do that?
I don't mind just staying in here unless
Cool.
you want me to go to a solo room.
Yeah, it just depends on how many people stay in here. So
Cool.
yeah, that's fine. All right. How'd that go for everybody? Okay, got a thumbs up. All right, all right. What questions did we have about this or observations? Oh no, Chaz, I'm so sorry. Rana.
So when it comes to props now with use state, is the thing really the only things that we pass through in props now these functions that happen at the app, like the app level? Like in this case, the add idea, but a lot of the time previously, things were being passed down that were specific like values and variables that we needed to access.
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to talk about that. Is it okay if I kind of push it towards the end once we refactor another component? Okay, perfect. I'm gonna write that down so I don't forget. Passing down props. All right, cool. What other questions, Devin?
When I was looking at the use state, on the app one, they had the empty string and then a 0. So with those, do you just keep numbering them up or do they like reset in each component? Oh, see, this one doesn't even have like it's just empty strings all over the place. So why do they have the 0 for the use state set age one, but none of the others have numbers, I guess?
Where is that coming from, the app component?
That was, yeah, in the app component.
Okay. And we're gonna get to refactoring this one.
I think she just means in the lesson, on the example in the lesson.
Oh, okay, thank you. Right here. Yeah, it just kind of depends on what you want that initial state value to be, right? I think, you know, with the title and description, we know we definitely want that to be a string. It's a little like TypeScripty, right? It's setting like this is going to be a string. We don't know what its value is going to be. Age, we're saying like that's definitely going to be a number. That sort of like default value is going to be 0. Yeah, and you can set it to be anything, right? You know, I could set my initial state to be a string of Devin if I wanted to.
I don't think my brain made that connection that we were setting the like initial state with that. So thank you.
That's okay. I just kind of threw you in. So yeah, this is whatever you want that default value to be. It's often going to be something like this, right? Maybe it's an empty array, empty object, or maybe you want to be more specific, just depends. Yeah. All right, what did we notice going through this? Anything, any kind of like aha moments? Any like, oh, I like hooks or I hate hooks? So short and pretty, love them. That's always great. Teaching a concept, people like it. That's what we want. Yeah, honestly, I think it's a little hard to see with the size of our components, right? If you did refactor everything, hopefully you were able to eliminate a method, right? You are eliminating typing this dot state all over. You eliminated a constructor, you eliminated super, right? We're kind of chipping away at this a little bit. But with our kind of large projects, our large components, you'll kind of see them, that benefit of having them shorter and shorter, okay? So if you didn't notice, we do have our little cheat sheet here on how we refactored this in order to use hooks. Honestly, like I said, when I was going through this, I forgot a lot of things. So I was using those error messages to be like, oh, wait, I missed a this dot state, right? So going through, kind of similar from that first example, right? We're going to set up to use that use state. Got to make sure that we're bringing it in as well. We have to be really specific with these hooks on which ones we're using, okay? We have eliminated our method. We have kind of just done this on our on change where we've used that setter, right? For that title, for that description, we've passed in the value. It all magically works, hopefully. Yes, Daniel.
Yeah, so on my submit idea, I was still sort of assuming I would have to do key value pairs. So I did like title, and description, and it worked. So I guess just what's going on there? Why does it
Yeah.
work both ways?
Yeah, this is a little bit of object destructuring. The fact that we want the key to be title, the value is also that variable title, right? As long as they both match, we can just list them this way. Your way is totally fine too. This is just more of a shorthand, right? Maybe if we wanted the key of like the best title and the value was going to be the variable title, we'd have to spell them both out. But since we have this like fancy name match, we can just kind of list it out this way. So it's just some destructuring.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Devin, was your hand from before?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Gabby.
I have a question about the on change versus the on click attributes, events, whatever. So I took out the event from the submit idea from the button, but then the event stayed on the on changes for both of the inputs. I was just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
The event stayed on changes. Could you give me a little bit more information on what's going wrong?
Yeah, there's nothing really going wrong, but I guess it's kind of just wondering when to use what. So like when I refactored it, instead of it being like this dot handle change takes in the event, now it's just like set title event dot target dot value. Whereas for the button, it used to be like event arrow submit idea takes in the event as a parameter, and now it's just submit. Yeah. Yeah.
That one. Yeah. All right. Button dot on click event, set submit idea. And then we're going to just submit idea. All right. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I don't see a reason why these should be different. I think you would probably still do it with the events. If I had to guess, the reason here is that we're actually using the event in here, right? We're actually capturing that specific event and passing it into our set title. The button is just like, you know, yes, we're using the event to prevent the default, but we're not actually using that value in particular to do anything. Yeah, I'm going to try it with passing in the event, but I don't think it's something that should make a huge difference.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and take a palm because we're going to move towards the second part of hooks where we're going to learn about use effect. Super cool, more different than set state, use state. Okay. Let's take 7 minutes and then we will get into that. All right, as you are starting to come back from your palm, go ahead and add to the chat. What do we know now about use states? Great facts. All right, something I would add is exactly what Devin said. Allows us to set state without using set state. Out using set state. Okay, cool. All right, what else? What do we know about use state? Honey.
It lets you use your state without writing a class.
Yeah. Allows us to use state without using a class. Nice.
And I think like you can track what's happening in your state with it, can't you?
Track what's happening. Do you mean like inspecting it and kind of seeing it update?
Yeah.
Yeah, that should happen without using use state specifically. Yeah. All right, looking at the lesson real quick, just the thing that I kind of want you to remember is the argument it takes, right? So our use state, that's going to take one argument, the initial state, right? Also that use state returns a pair, the current state value and a function that lets you update it. That's kind of going to be that big difference, right? Use state, we've got that pair, okay? Okay, returns a pair, the current state, and a function that allows you to update it, right? That's going to be the biggest difference in how we are accessing and updating state using these hooks, okay? All right, we feel pretty good on use state? Maybe? Okay, cool. All right, so we're gonna move on. I'll send out these notes too if I'm going too fast. We're gonna start talking about the effect hook, okay? This is super cool, right? Ultimately, the effect hook has like 3 purposes in one, right? Which is magical. We get lots of functionality with one hook, okay? So this is called the use effect, okay? It allows us to perform side effects. That's going to be things like fetching our data, subscriptions, subscribing to things, unsubscribing from a functional component, okay? It serves the same purpose as component did mount, component did update, and component will unmount, all unified into this one thing, okay? There are some slight differences, but from the React docs, it says almost specifically, you can think of use effect as these 3 things, okay? So this is going to allow us to use all 3 lifecycle methods and maybe be a little bit cleaner, okay? So our first example here, we're changing things up a little bit. It's not an idea box, it's a pet box, okay? Where we have a URL we're fetching from. Okay, this one's actually using async await, so a little bit different. Okay, we have a function here, our get pets, where we have specified our URL, we're getting the response, we're waiting for it, and we're going to store those pets in state, right? That's all we're doing, getting some pets, putting them in state, right? We have used hooks to go ahead and set our initial state to be an empty array, so it's ready for those pets. We're also doing a little bit of error handling here, right? Where we have our catch, okay? So then we come down to the newish thing where we see this use effect, okay? We've passed in an anonymous function and we've invoked get pets, okay? Then we see this little empty array, okay? We're gonna talk about why we're doing this, right? So this is exactly like our component did mount, where once everything's mounted and ready to go, we're gonna get the pets, store them in state, okay? All right, just looking at this code, do we have any initial questions? Daniel.
I've seen it before, but I don't know what it is. What is that try nomenclature?
Yeah. So that's a convention that is often paired with async await. A way to kind of do the error handling. So we're gonna try to fetch this. If it doesn't work, we're gonna catch it. So it looks different, but it's just another way of handling promises with that async await. I can probably give you some more information on the try catch, but it's just another one of those patterns for dealing with promises. So something that does happen whenever we are using async await and try catch is this function is going to return a promise, right? Rana.
Does this still work if we had like a separate API calls file import the methods that we've written there to do the fetch?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, should still work. Yeah. All right. So there is a problem with this code. Well, there would be if we didn't have this empty array stored here, okay? Has anybody seen this before? This just like passing in an empty array to use effect. It's a little complicated, so it's okay if not. All right, so we have said that this use effect is kind of like 3 lifecycle methods in one, right? It's going to run on mount, did update, and did unmount, right? Do we want to fetch the pets for all 3 of those lifecycle methods, right? Our app has mounted, our app has updated somewhere, also considering maybe all of the children components that have updated. It has unmounted, right? Do we actually want to keep fetching these pets on every single little change that occurs, right? Maybe not, okay? So this special kind of like little argument thing here is actually called dependencies, okay? Dependencies. And what this does is you can actually specify, hey, I only really care if the pet's state has been updated, okay? If that's what we wanted to do, inside of that array, we would just list pets, okay? It allows us to be really specific on what changes we actually care about, okay? Now, we don't have pets in here. It's just a blank empty array. What this does is it tells React only run on mount, okay? Just run once, right? So whenever you see a use effect, it just has an empty array. That is literally the same exact thing as component did mount, okay? Now, this is something we have to be careful of, okay? Infinite loops can happen to you. So if we didn't have this empty array, right, we just had use effect, get some pets, what would happen is we'd fetch the data, state would be updated. React's like, awesome, state is updated. Let's re-render. Wait, we re-rendered. Let's call this use effect. Oh, we should get some data. Let's update state. State's updated. We should re-render, right? Each of these things gets called, and we are stuck in an infinite loop. Okay, so this is just something you'll mostly run into when fetching data. Being really specific, passing in that empty array to say, please just run on mount. That's the only one I care about. Or putting in a piece of data that you specifically care about, right? So if we just passed in pets here, use effect would run anytime the state of pets has changed, or error, or some prop, right? It doesn't matter. We can put anything in there, and that's going to say, just use the effect whenever you notice a change with this variable. Okay. So use effect, super cool, right? It allows us to combine 3 lifecycle methods into one, but also we have to be aware of that, right? Yes, Grace.
Can we have multiple use effects in a single file?
I don't think so. I would have to double check, but you're probably just going to be like listing them out here. If you had a situation of like, maybe you had this use effect, but then you had a different use effect that you wanted to run all the time, I'm going to have to look into that.
I think the thing I was kind of more thinking is like you want to pay attention to like a very specific state
Mhm.
and for it to like update on a specific state. Like when a specific state updates, you want this to run. What if you have like multiple states you want to pay attention to in a single file?
Right. Yeah, you can definitely like list them out in this array. If I wanted pets and error, right? I wanted a whole bunch of items that I was looking for to change. You could totally do that. But I'm gonna have to look into if you can have just like totally separate use effects. I'm not sure.
So best practice would probably be to like specify which things you want to pay attention to the state changing, and then like have functions in there that would like target those specific states.
Yeah, if you can, it's not a huge deal. But if you do know like that specificity of like, I only care about this, it's best to put it in.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Ethan.
One thing that I'm struggling, excuse me, to wrap my head around is how it bundles up component did mount and component did update into one. Because like with class components, there was like specific use cases for why you wanted to do component did mount so that it would only fire once at the very beginning. And I know you said that it has to do with the array, but that's not totally clear to me yet how that like distinguishes whether it should only run once or like every single time it updates.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those Reacty conventions. Like they set it up expecting to get that array passed in to know to only run once, but I can try to get you some more specific info on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so this is a little different, right? We're looking at some new things. It's a little more complex. We're also getting our data a different way. I would encourage you to also try this out with fetching. It should work the same way. There are some slight differences. It should still work, but there's under the hood differences. But it should still work fairly similarly for you, okay? All right, so making sure I didn't miss anything, because I think there are a few things I mentioned, some specificities, okay? So we've used the use effect hook. We've fetched all the pets, right? Since app is now a functional component, we don't actually have access to component did mount, okay? So if you tried to do component did mount in a component like this, probably shouldn't work. Hopefully it gives you a helpful error message. This is how we're gonna kind of switch over to using use effect now. All right, so this is something kind of important, okay? Took me a little while to wrap my head around it as well. So couple rules. We know React developers like to kind of put some rules in there. They have expectations on how we're using React. The use effect hook must return a cleanup function or nothing at all. Okay. What is a cleanup function? Probably have never written one. Thank you, Phil. So a cleanup function is something that you want to run on dismount, okay? Say you had a situation where you were subscribed to something, some sort of connection, we haven't done this, where you're getting data, and once that component unmounted, you wanted to unsubscribe or clean up, right? So if your use effect hook returns a function, it's going to act like a component did unmount, okay? I'm going to put this in some notes. Okay. We're going to go to use effect. All right, go ahead and put in what we learned first. This pretty much combines did mount, what is it, will update. Thank you for looking that up, Phil. Yes, component did mount, did update, will unmount. Okay. Did update, will unmount. Okay. Into one. All right. So it combines all three, but we're going to do a little bit of different things depending on which one we want to access. Okay. So for component did mounts, we're going to pass in array of dependencies, or it will be empty. Okay, so our component did mount. We know that the dependencies gives us a little bit of extra functionality, but if we only want it to run once, we're going to pass in that empty array. Okay. All right. So our component will unmount. I think that casing is right, maybe not. We are going to return a cleanup function. Okay, and that's going to act like a component will unmount. I will be honest with you, this is something I have never used. Okay, not saying that you will never use it, it's just more one of those like rare situations that comes up. Okay. So if you do accidentally return something in your use effect, React will give you an error message and give you information as to why it doesn't like that. Okay. It's been built to kind of expect that nothing is going to be returned from it. I know this is a lot. Thank you for sticking with me. All right, we're going to keep talking about use effect. Okay. All right. So the use effect hook, just remember the rule is we cannot return anything from this function. If we do, React is going to yell at us. If we do want to return something, it must be a cleanup function saying, hey, our component, we've unmounted it. We want to clean something up here. Okay. We also can't return a promise. Okay. Use effect does not like when we return promises. This means that we can't write an async function inside of our use effect, because our async function always returns a promise. Okay, we haven't talked about this a ton, our async await, but this code right here, we didn't tell it to return anything, but by default, it is going to return a promise. Okay. You use the words async await, a promise will be returned. Always. Yes, honey.
I just want to make sure I wrote this down right. Did you say you've never used use effect, or you've never used returning a cleanup function?
Returning a cleanup function in a use effect.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Don't worry, I've used use effect. Okay, so this code right here, just to reiterate, using async await will by default return a promise. Okay, even though we didn't tell it to, this just happens. Okay, use effects is expecting that you are not returning anything out of it other than a cleanup function. Okay, so if we copied this code and put it in use effect, we would get an error message. Okay, I'm telling you that because if you don't remember this, that is totally fine. React will remind you, which is like, yes, love that. Thank you, React. Okay. All right. More on that empty array. Okay. As I said, without passing in that empty array as a second argument to use effect, we could get caught in that infinite loop, right? Because by default, that use effect hook is going to run when the component mounts and after every update. Okay. So we're stuck in this loop of updating state, re-rendering, updating state, and we don't want that to happen. It's okay if it does, but you'll have to fix it. Because we're setting the state after every data fetch, the component updates and the effect runs again. By adding an empty array as a second argument, we avoid activating the effect hook when the component updates, and it will only run once the component mounts and unmounts. If we want the effect to run when one of the variables is updated, as I said, you could pass it in, right? We can add that variable to the array, right? Where I said we could have that empty array, we could maybe put pets in it, be really specific, right? We only want that effect to run when that specific variable is updated. This could be a prop or a piece of state, it doesn't matter. Because we only want to update the pets once on mount, and there are no other props or pieces of state that depend on this effect, we can just pass in an empty array, okay? More docs linked here on conditionally firing an effect. Okay, I know that was a lot, but in practice, once you start to actually experiment with these hooks, if you want to right now, you're mostly just going to be doing something like this, right? Yes, exactly, Phil. If you get into an infinite loop with your network request, and maybe you're using an API that gives you like 40,000 requests a day, you can burn through all of them easily with your infinite loop, okay? That's okay, that totally happens. You can use our APIs that we have linked because I don't think that they are limited at all. You can burn through all of them, get that one infinite loop out of the way, and then be confident to use the ones that are paid. Yes. All right. Anyway, like I said, in practice, you probably will not encounter unmounting at this point, unless you're very curious about it. I typically just kind of use the use effect as a component did mount and go with it from there in fetching my data. Okay, what time is it? All right. I want to get you doing a little bit more refactoring, okay? We are going to be using the use effect hook, not for fetch requests, for something else, just so you get some kind of hands-on practice with that. Probably spend about 20 minutes doing this in breakout rooms, and then we'll come back for questions, okay? Before I open up the rooms again, do we have any questions here? Kind of remembering this should feel still pretty fuzzy right now. All right, the rooms are set up to be the same as they were before. I'm going to put 20 minutes on the timer and I'll go ahead and open them.